You're listening to Roadblocks Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell, CEO and co-founder of Dynamico,
and Amy Weaver, Dynamico's marketing director. On this episode of RevOps Champions, we're talking with Kate Kompelien about the link between the customer experience and revenue. So what if we just jump in and talk a little bit, Kate, about your experience at Best Buy and some challenges that you faced when you were building their customer experience strategy?
Sure. So at Best Buy, when I started there, I was actually a market researcher. So myself, like a lot of new customer experience practitioners, it was my first foray into customer experience. So I started there doing store redesign research, as well as how do you sell new products that customers haven't heard about, home energy, health technology. And so when they asked me to be the first person at Best Buy that had a customer experience title, I thought, sure, why not? I'm very entrepreneurial. I like to build and design new things. So I thought, this is great. But in reality, myself, like many other people are facing today, what is customer experience, right? So challenge number one is there's 100 different definitions for what customer experience is. And that's a real challenge for people because like marketing, operations, finance, where there's really clear defined roles, that's not the case with customer experience. And so I started my customer experience practice there with a combination of market research tools, because I had just come from a market research background, to how do I shape these tools to be more experience focused. And so really brought to life a lot of interesting things to the organization. What is the most important in buying consumer electronics from an experience perspective? What is the role of a channel to consumers to help Best Buy realize you don't need to develop every activity for every channel? And then I started reading a lot of articles on customer experience and getting a lot of different perspectives of what it is, how to do it, how do you think about it within an organization. And Forrester was really helpful. And when I told them I designed my practice based on a lot of articles they wrote, they thought I was crazy because what I built had nothing to do with their articles. And I reminded them that they live in a silo and they have a customer experience journey mapping group and a voice of customer group over here, processing over here. And I just put a lot of their pieces together to create this process. And that ultimately became the design of the program at Best Buy. But to get there, there was 100 roadblocks, right? The first roadblock was the amount of time that the process took to get to a future state vision. The company is like, we don't have time for that. Go, right? So that was the first challenge. The second challenge was because I didn't clearly articulate that this is a cross-functional effort, we're bubbling up insights to give you better insights to make better decisions for your business. They thought that this customer experience practice was going to be taking over, that we were going to be making decisions on their behalf. And there's a lot of pushback on that. And so that was a huge learning opportunity for myself that, to be very clear that you lead your business, you own your business decisions. We're just here to help you understand the customer experience. So that was a roadblock. So what we did on the first roadblock of it took so much time is one of the senior leaders at Best Buy said, Kate, just go do it. Don't tell anyone you're doing it, just do it. And when you're ready to present the current state customer journey, you let me know and I'll get the right people in the room. And so we did that and people were thrilled with what they were learning. They were super happy about working with their cross-functional partners. They were willing to move into the design aspect to get to their future state vision. So I tell people today, if you don't get buy-in right away, just do it, ask for permission later. Because really the value of the output is really understanding your total experience from a cross-functional perspective. People really love that, and they're happy when you can get to that point.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've actually seen, if I may interject for a bit, we've seen similar things when we're doing large CRM implementations where we know there's going to be a lot of change management that needs to take place, I would say more than half of our clients choose not to call it that internally.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to talk about change management. They want to just get going and hope that the change management will kind of just happen organically, which it can, but it does create some challenges along the way. So I can see the parallels in your story there and what we see as well.
Yeah, and as it relates to change management and CRM, have a couple examples there. So with the CX transformation process that I use, I make sure that based on the experience, we have the full cross-functional team that is engaging at certain times in the process, because if people can understand what's going on and they feel like they have a say and can impact it in some way, they are much more willing to execute on something than if you just said, all right, here's the experience, go do this, right? And to bounce ideas off of each other. And from a CRM perspective, we actually did CX transformation ahead of CRM implementation for a client of ours, both to help them understand all the things CRM needed to support in the future state experience.
Yes.
So that was one thing. And to pause there for a second, every single time I do understanding current state, getting to your future state vision, and then getting ready to build it out, we do technology scoping. And 9 times out of 10, at least 60% of the new experiences have some relation to CRM. So CRM needs to support at least 60% of our experiences.
Awesome.
And then the other side of it is we help them with what you would call the typical sales CRM. They had 5 different businesses within this client, and they all were looking at CRM from a sales perspective differently. So we upfront understood all of their processes and put together, here's what's core and common across all your processes. Here's what needs to be unique and different from a CRM perspective. And the end result of it was when they were ready then to implement CRM, it was surprisingly on time, in budget, and they were able to address and make sure they were meeting all of their future state experience expectations. So pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually another interesting sort of parallel where, so about 5 years ago, right after we started doing what we called full stack CRM implementations, where we were implementing cross-functionally marketing, sales, and customer service, one of the things that we noticed was that, we're more focused on the mid-market, so companies with 2,000 employees and smaller, whereas, obviously some of the experiences you're talking about are way bigger companies, where again, you have different challenges when it comes to transformation and implementation. But one of the things that we noticed earlier on was that companies were really bringing us in to increase the internal efficiencies, and they weren't even thinking about customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
Customer experience would just happen to be something that they realized, improve over time, because one of the things that we do as part of our implementations, especially when you're doing customer service, is, are you doing NPS scores and any kind of, whether it's CSAT, whatever, to make sure that the customer experience, we weren't even using those terms,
right,
but is improving. And it was crazy in those first couple of years. Everyone was like, wow, we're implementing the CRM to create internal efficiency. But one of the biggest benefits was, in fact, our customer experience just went through the roof,
Yeah.
So we always talk about, the two sides of the same coin.
Right. Yeah. And actually, the last 6 years when I was in consulting, my focus has been on mid-size clients as well. So since I've left Best Buy, it has been on the mid-size client base. And as it relates to internal processes, one of the things that we've been doing is overlaying the customer experience understanding. So all of our qualitative research we do around the customer experience, and we overlay it on top of the process map. So now you can start to see, where are your internal processes causing either employee issues or customer issues? And then we're able to highlight on the process maps, where do we want to design around improving the process? And so instead of just designing around the experience, now we can design both around the experience and the process as it relates to improving the customer experience.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, we could talk all day about all these interesting little things, but Amy, I won't derail us at this point.
Yeah, why don't we launch into your experience with Abtex and Tech Digital?
Yeah.
and talk about the challenges that were similar but not, moving from the retail side of things.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And actually, it sort of goes back to the first challenge I talked about is everybody talks about customer experience in a different way. And so for me, one of my first challenges where technology talks about that technology improves the customer experience. And it can, and it does. But without the context of what are the challenges in the experience, it's difficult for technology to solve problems because technology can be set up in thousands of different ways. And today, with so many technology companies being able to do many, many different things, whereas in the past, maybe 10 years ago, you'd have to buy 10 systems to do 10 different things. Now you can buy a system or two to do those same 10 things. So, one of the first challenges I had was how do I help my technology partners at Avtex realize the value of doing some upfront customer experience understanding to then show how the technology was going to solve those problems. And then you're basically able to sell the technology. The technology sells itself versus having to go in and sell the technology and convince your customer that they need technology to do these things, because the customers or the clients not always believing that they need to do these things, right? So that's part of our customer experience transformation work is overlaying. So from the very beginning, we'll start to understand the role of technology in that experience, both from the employee's perspective when they're having to interact with different technology systems throughout the experience, what's hindering a good experience, what's helping with an experience, how is technology solving problems or not, so that when we get to current state, we can have an analysis of all the technology and the role it's playing in the experience. And then when we get to that future state vision, and these are the new experiences I want to build, being able to show the customer with these technology solutions, if you turn these things on or turn this off, the salesperson no longer has to sell the technology because the client wants these new experiences enabled. And if the technology is going to do that for them, sold. So we had another client who took this current state understanding and future state vision and built their entire technology platform off of the experience. And that, they spent millions and millions of dollars, but they were seeing the benefits of having their technology system support the experience. And like you said, Brendan, showing the NPS is dramatically improving over time by making technology decisions based on the customer and the employee experience.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the continuation of that, where we saw sort of customer NPS scores improving. When we then started measuring employee experience, that was also going up and to the right continuously, which of course, in the last 4 years, that was almost more important than customer experience. But of course, they're both critical, and they will both be critical for as far out as I can see anyhow.
Yeah, and I always say you can't fully improve the customer experience until you understand the employee experience, especially the employees that are directly interacting with your customers. You do need to understand what's getting in their way of providing a great customer experience. And sometimes that's technology, sometimes it's knowledge, sometimes it's process. There's, a lot of things that go into that.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, because it's very easy for us to get dragged into the back office functions, as it were. But we're purposely, as hard as it is, purposely very focused on customer-facing teams, so marketing, sales, and customer service. And even though we often will be integrating the technology between the customer-facing tech stack and then the ERP or whatever the back office looks like, we don't want to get pulled into the back office too much, because the customer-facing teams really have a different impact on the customer. And obviously, there are finance and other sort of back office teams who can absolutely negatively or positively impact the customer experience. But right now, there aren't any systems that we're comfortable with that can do that across, all 4 layers of, well, the way we talk about it, I'm sure the way which is similar to how you think about it is, people, process, data, and technology. And even though people know us to be the folks who implement the technology, we cannot implement the technology unless we're clear on what the data, the processes, and the teams and people look like and how they're aligned.
Right.
But anyway, that's an interesting thought that I will be using again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to tie that in with something that we talked about last week, Kate, talk about the process that you've put together for defining your CX strategy and how you would do that for a client now that you've got your own business.
Yeah. So I like to simplify it in three different phases. One is understanding the current state. And with my mid-sized clients, it's super important for us to align on who do we want to understand that experience for, because companies have a lot of different personas. And it's not only about who's your bread and butter, because we want to make sure we're not messing anything up for them, but also who do you believe you should be doing more business with and you're just not today? Or which customer base are you losing, which you don't want to lose or don't think you should be losing? And what is that total experience we're trying to understand? What are the channels customers can interact with across that experience? Who are the frontline employees that are interacting with that customer? Because we really want to talk to them and learn about their barriers and their struggles. And then we look at any past data they have on that persona or that experience. We go into what I like to call experience research. So it's qualitative, but it's really focused on understanding that total experience. It could be observations, intercepts, ride-alongs, shop-alongs, deep dive interviews, a whole variety of ways to really understand that full experience. And then we, from that information, develop the experience persona. So these aren't brand personas, but they're meant to help clients understand who are the people that you're serving and what is it like for them in this experience. Then we bring a cross-functional team together to have a journey mapping workshop. So we'll put a draft together on everything we learned. And then this is where it comes into play, getting cross-functional people to talk, to work together, to understand different perspectives, challenges. I had this one client at Current State Journey Mapping. After the workshop, she's like, that's it. I'm giving my entire marketing budget to operations because until we fix these problems, I do not want to be marketing our products. And I thought that was great because what cooperation and collaboration to say, hey, I really understand that this is a big problem. We need to fix it. And if I continue to use my marketing budget to advertise all this stuff, we're advertising a bad experience. And then operations doesn't have the budget to fix what they need to fix. So I thought that was pretty great. And again, that's an important moment for change management because people get a voice, they get an opinion, they get to share their perspectives, what they believe we're missing maybe in the experience or areas we should focus on. After that workshop, we finalize the maps. The maps are actually never final because the experience is constantly changing and evolving, but based on the feedback from that workshop. And then we align with our core team on, based on the moments that matter and what are some of the primary pain points, what do we want to solve for? What do we want to innovate around? And then again, we gather a large group of cross-functional stakeholders, frontline employees, people that might know the problem areas really well, people that are really good at innovating and ideating. And we get a big group of people together. We have a lot of different stations that we're going through, solving problems together. A lot of good conversation happens during those points in time. And then we walk out of there with a lot of different solutions that get prioritized into their future state journey map.
Very cool.
Another thing before I go forward in future state is in current state, because we have that good understanding, I can create a voice of customer program design. So based on those key moments that matter and the pain points that are getting in the way, where should you get feedback from your customers along that journey? What are the questions you need to ask because you know those are problems that you need to solve for? So then when the feedback comes back, it's really actionable because it's based on those moments. It's based on the problems. It will get leadership's attention that these are actually areas we need to invest in, we need to improve. So another way to really start to see your NPS scores or other overall metrics improve. Other areas companies can benefit is sales training. So if you know the experience and where problems are going wrong, you can retrain customer-facing employees on how to deliver a better experience. You can use it for content, marketing content mapping. So mapping out content, is it in the right place? Are we missing content? From a communication perspective, along that journey, where are we communicating to our customers? Are the messages relevant? Are we sharing things too early, too late? So there's a lot of rich, important information or tasks you can do with current state. By the time we get to our future state customer experience or your CX strategy, again, a lot of ideas come out of ideation, sometimes many hundreds. And so how do you consolidate those, theme those, get those to be the best ideas? And then we have an alignment again around what we want to bring forward. Once we bring that forward, the very next step is to do technology scoping. So if they hadn't done it across the whole project, because it is more time consuming, more expensive, but you do end with a technical architecture roadmap that's 2 to 3 years long of all these different stages of technology development, because a lot of experiences can be tech heavy today. We do light tech scoping. And then we do this with IT. So IT can start to have a voice and start to understand the experience we're trying to deliver. And then it starts to show, oh, look, like I said, CRM is involved in these 8 out of the 12 experiences. You actually can't build these out unless your CRM is operating in a unique way to make these experiences happen.
Right.
And then we go into roadmaps. When are we going to start to build this out? So we put a now, next, later framework around it at first, and then we start to put timing around that. That roadmap is really based on both IT effort and customer pain. So the things that are most painful, we want to try to fix first and trying to balance that out with the IT effort. And then finally, project charters. So for every future state solution that goes in your CX strategy, who are the people? What are the risks? What are the gaps? We talk about the metrics and different things like that. So the team that takes it over to build it out has a lot of good information and guidance on what they need to deliver on.
Really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of questions, Kate. That was really helpful.
Sure.
So, because you have a unique perspective with your experience, having worked in B2C and B2B, from your perspective, are the similarities and the differences when you're doing this for a B2B organization versus a B2C or vice versa?
Right. No, that's a really good question. So B2C, hundreds of thousands of customers, right? And so you're trying to understand what's important to the thousands, like what are some of those themes you should be paying attention to? How do you get more personalized? It's a little bit easier because you have a lot of times, like in retail, for example, they are selling to that end consumer. So you can get feedback pretty quickly. On the B2B side, you have few but very important customers. That customer base needs to know you really understand them, their needs, the products and services you're offering are very specific to their individual needs. If you lose a customer, it's a huge deal because that could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of volume. And so it is critically important for B2B companies to understand their customer experience, their direct customer, which could be a Walmart, it could be a bakery down the street, and to really understand, it's a little different because sometimes I think of core and common versus unique and valuable. So with B2B, what are the core and common things that you just have to do that are going to please all customers? But it's even more important for B2B to understand what's unique and valuable about each customer and to make sure that you're meeting those needs. Just because it is so critical, you can't lose customers in a B2B way without really affecting your bottom line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, because obviously we're pretty much in the B2B space completely. And we could just kind of talk about the fact that we're in the relationship business enough, because it's so critical to your point. Every client and every person working within a client team is unique and valuable. And, the better you can understand and serve them, the better that relationship will be. I like that. Thank you. And then the other thing that we often run into, because again, ultimately what we're doing, which is why I was so excited to have you on today, it impacts customer experience, right?
Absolutely.
And you talked about, personas and customer journey mapping and what have you. And one of the things that's been really difficult for us because there is no, especially not yet today, even though it seems to be changing and improving, it's really hard to determine who owns the customer experience in an organization because there are not a lot of companies, at least in the mid-market space, where you have a CXO. And then the question is, well, is customer experience, as critical as it is it owned by the CEO, the COO, the CMO? Who owns customer experience? And of course, it's challenging because it's a cross-functional thing, which of course has been, I guess, one of the sort of the most consistent trends in the last 10 years has been that everything has become cross-functional. You already alluded to this earlier on where 10 years ago, you needed 10 systems. Now you can have one system with 10 teams on one integrated system. But the one elusive thing is still who owns customer experience.
Oh my gosh, that is such a hot button. And people have many different perspectives on this. Me personally, I really do not like when people say everyone owns the customer experience, because even if there are nuggets of truth to that, it just makes nobody know what to do. If everyone owns it, where do we start?
No accountability. Yeah.
Personally, I think the CEO should own it. It makes it super easy from a customer experience focus if the CEO owns it, because it really should tie tightly with your strategy. And so to define what are we going to focus on this year as it relates to the customer experience, if it's tied to your strategy, it makes it easier. If digital, so you can talk about channel owning the customer experience. And if a channel owns it, then all of the priorities become focused on that channel, which then you've just sort of lost this. Well, what about store? What about contact center?
Mm-hmm.
If you say marketing owns it, they then sort of evolve it into this brand story, brand message, which it's elements of that, but that's not customer experience, right? And so CEO, in my opinion, should own it. Direction of what experiences should be focused on that year should come based on the strategy. And then that then determines the cross-functional teams that should be a part of that customer experience strategy and planning.
Yeah, that's really good. Amy, what else do you have?
Well, I think we have to hit on the important question of how does improving the customer experience tie back to revenue? And you've touched on it a couple of times of like lost revenue opportunities for sure, but the bottom line is the bottom line, right? Like, why should people care? And it's revenue. So if you could dig into that a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And I'll give an example that I think is easy to get your head around. So let's just talk about the contact center for right now. So as calls are coming in, agents cannot solve most of them. And what I mean by that is if a customer is calling in because inventory is gone, product arrived damaged, can't log into my account, hundreds of things, right? That the contact center is sort of like, in those cases, the messenger. Sorry that happened. I'll figure out what I can do. Often results in multiple transfers of calls, could take days to get back to the customer. And a lot of contact center managers don't want to hear about things that they can't control. And if you think about that, it's like, well, your contact volume is never going to reduce then, because if you're not sharing, here's where cross-functional comes in again. But if you don't have a very clear understanding of your top call types, what are the top 80%, or what are your top 20% of calls?
80-20.
80-20, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if they really understood the customer and the agent experience around those top contact types and could then get those issues to the right leaders in the organization to solve those problems, imagine the reduction in contacts. Imagine the increase in first contact resolution. All of that stuff directly relates to the bottom line. And agent retention. I don't want to be an agent if over and over and over and over and over and over again, I have to say, sorry, that's happening. Sorry, that's happening. Sorry, that's happening. There's nothing I can do. That's very draining on the agent. And I actually have been blogging about this recently because I just think of these poor agents that are constantly getting trained, show more empathy, better listening skills. Well, all that's great. But if you can't solve the customer problem at the end of the day, does that stuff really make a difference in the customer experience? A little bit, but at the end of the day, you're not solving problems and you're continuing to be a large cost for the company.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and to your point about the employees' experience, they're not empowered. So they're just going in every day and getting beat up on the phones.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so important to be cross-functional. That's a really good example of needing to be cross-functional.
Right. And again, to your earlier point, it kind of starts at the top. I think everyone always, well, at least for me, the restaurant example is an easy one where what makes one restaurant more successful than the other is essentially just getting it right the first time. Because as soon as you have to remake a meal because it was wrong, in other words, the customer didn't like it,
right,
that just completely, wipes out any margin that you might have had. And it's really, really hard. So to your point, you got to go back and fix the product, or in that case, combination of product and service, because until you do that, you're not really fixing the problem, and it becomes a very expensive problem, which then, of course, leads to churn and what have you. What else do you have on tying back the customer experience to revenue? Yeah.
So you mentioned something about designing a measurement program so that you'd highlight where the inefficiencies are and stuff. So what might that look like?
So it goes back to having an understanding of the current state experience. And I actually, qualitatively, I'll start to gather those moments that matter in that experience for that customer. And there's not a lot, right? You should think of moments that matter as these moments where people are wanting to drop out of your experience completely. So let me give you an example there. If you're talking B2B and you're just time and time again not having the inventory, like they have to go somewhere else, right? So those are what I mean by key moments. And I quantify them because I want them to rank, because I might hear 10 moments that seem important to customers. But like I said, there's really like 2 to 3. And so I'll have customers rank it on a survey, most to least important. Like this has to go right if I'm going to do business with you. And then in the survey, I also include all the pain points that relate to those moments that matter. And I ask customers on a survey quantitatively, check all of these pain points you've experienced with this company. And then of the ones they check, I ask them to rank the severity of it. And the most severe being like, I'm going to leave this company. And then I go back with the results of this and I look through the key moments and I see where they occur on that journey. And I say, okay, here's the places you need to collect customer feedback. And then I look at the pain points that rated high as being bad, like take care of these. And I have the questions be very specific to those moments in that part of the journey so that when the survey results come back, leadership can really see like, ooh, we have a problem here. Because unfortunately today, and I know a lot of these companies like Qualtrics and Medallia are trying to make things easier for their customers. So now they're starting to say, hey, you're in financial services and contact center, we have a survey just for you, right? We've developed a survey that's standard across credit unions and your contact center. Well, what's happening is the information that's coming back is so generic. It's not specific to their issues they have within the organization or their customer base. And they don't know what to do with the information because it's too generic.
Well, it's boilerplate, like the questions.
Yes.
Is what you're saying. They have this boilerplate survey, so you're going to get boilerplate responses.
Exactly. And then the company doesn't know what to do with the information, so they do nothing. And so when we could get more specific to their experience, to their customers, to their moments, and start to show the company, ooh, we have a problem here. Problem here, please solve. They're much more likely to pay attention. Now, there's another problem is that a lot of times when they do get the surveys back, because they might be taking place in different channels and they have different channel leaders, how do you get the information to the right people at the right time to make these changes to the experience? So that's where we come in and help look at the total experience, look at who's in charge. Also, we help people track and measure. If you're building this new experience, you have now this baseline number. How is this improvement you're making actually starting to show improvements in your core metrics?
Right.
Because it's challenging for people. Everybody has a day job. They're super busy. So how do we make it impactful and easy for them to take care of these problems?
Which, of course, then helps leaders, invest in the right areas to, again, back to the revenue. Well, I guess it impacts revenue and profitability, kind of to the examples we were talking about. If you do things wrong, it's going to erode your margins pretty quickly. Whereas if you get them right, not only are you going to keep customers and clients, but you're going to have a lot left at the end of the day because everything is more efficient and therefore more profitable.
Yes. And that brings into another comment about the CFOs. And I know CFOs are starting to take notice of the value of customer experience, but that's why they really should care.
And CRM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting. But you keep going. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, you can go. Take it on from there.
I guess it's the other side of the coin of, and I asked you earlier, like, who owns or who should own the customer experience? And as we talked about earlier, customer experience and operational efficiency are two sides of the same coin. The operational efficiency, and of course, we like to think that technology is a big part of the center of the coin to make sure you achieve both. But of course, as is customer experience and all these sort of investments in transformation are all part of how you sort of solve for both. But what we've seen as the buyers in our situation are completely cross-functional, essentially the entire C-suite. The CFO is suddenly having a much bigger voice because now they have, especially if once we've implemented the CRM and everybody's clear about what the data is from marketing through sales, through customer service, the CFO loves that, the fact that he can now track, or they can now track all that data to allow the CEO or the COO to make decisions that are going to keep improving those areas so they continuously get better. So you're driving revenue up through customer experience ultimately, and you're increasing profitability because of the efficiencies that you're creating by identifying and fixing problems faster.
Yeah, I would think the CEO would be upfront of making a purchase decision for technology if they knew that these are some major issues in our customer experience, and you as a technology company could come in and say, here's how CRM is going to improve these areas of issues for your customers. I would think the CFO would feel more confident in signing over the money to do that if it could be directly correlated with improving the customer experience. So it's kind of like double value, right? I'm going to be able to track these improvements. And I also know that adding this technology is actually going to solve some of our customers' biggest problems.
Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the things I've learned in the last couple of years is also just the different types of CFOs. You have some CFOs that are more strategic and forward thinking, whereas for me and many others, CFO is always sort of grouped into the category of, well, they're always measuring what's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a CFO who's really strategic and forward looking, which we're meeting more and more of those,
yeah,
it's amazing how they suddenly become part of that decision-making process and a very important one.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Have you worked with many CFOs, or is it usually a CEO role that you would be?
Yeah, so it does actually, the C-suite in general, whether it's a CMO, sometimes it's a CMO, sometimes it's a CDO, sometimes it's a CEO. I would say from a CFO, that needs to be more of my focus. They tend to come in either to approve the project or as you're getting to your future state vision. But it would be more advantageous if they could be included up front so they really understood where they needed to keep tabs and awareness of what we were learning, so that when it does come time for investing in technology or investing in improving operational inefficiencies, things like that, that they would, or having a voice of customer program, because a lot of people don't want to spend money. And I completely understand why, right? If the results are not actionable and if they're not getting to the right people, why would you invest in a program? But if they could be upfront understanding, no, if we really base it on the experience, or no, if we really base technology on improving the customer experience, I think they would be much more open to doing some things they should be doing that are going to cost money up front, but save the company, not only revenue and improving profit, but also improving customer retention, because it's super expensive having to constantly refill your pipeline versus retaining the customers you have.
Sure.
Well, that could be a whole nother episode on its own.
It could be.
We're loving talking about the Bowtie funnel, and we're talking about it a lot more. Are you familiar with the Bowtie funnel?
No, I am not. That is a new term for me.
Bowtie funnel.
Yeah. So if you take a classic sales and marketing funnel and you turn it on its side, so 90 degrees, and then so the sale happens, at the end of that funnel. So they become a customer or a client, and then you have the other funnel, which is essentially, how the lifetime value of that customer. And the more you work and look at this, the more you realize that the right side of the funnel, which is once they're already a customer, is far more valuable than the left side of the bow tie funnel. So,
and when I think of that analogy with it going this way, is customers sliding right out.
Exactly.
Like, how do you prevent them from like slipping right out of that funnel?
Yeah.
And keeping them in the funnel.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the irony, of course, of it is as you dig into the bow tie funnel concept, you realize that the whole funnel concept is a little flawed, because it's always, you're always talking about there's holes in the funnel. So you need to keep refilling the top of the classic sales and marketing funnel.
Yeah.
Well, that's, again, super inefficient.
Right.
If you could just be better at getting the customer and then making the customer really happy through a good customer experience, and then keeping them for the longest time, I don't know a business who wouldn't want that.
Right. I don't either.
Well, Kate, thank you so much. This was super insightful and a lot of fun. I look forward to having some more conversations about our common interests.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it quite a lot myself.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.